Okay, so we're getting ready for our final panel of the day. Hold on, are we missing? Dr. Wallace, right? Oh, you're coming back, yes. Right, so we have Mr. Williams, yes. We have Mr. McIntosh, right? Mr. Wallace, that's it. And Mr. George is there. Okay. So our panel is ready. This is the challenges faced by oversight and civilian oversight institutions in the Caribbean. The moderator is Mr. Justice Cecil Kennard. Mr. Kennard is the chairman of the Police Complaints Authority in Guyana. Sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned just now, I am the chairman of the Police Complaints Authority in Guyana. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this afternoon because this is a conference of historic importance. We have never had a conference of this nature in the Caribbean. And thanks must go to Mr. David West and his team for organizing this conference and for getting together people from various parts of the world. As chairman of Police Complaints Authority, like every other oversight bodies, we have our challenges in the performance of our respective functions. I will have a little to say when the presentations would have been finished by the other panelists. But as I said, I'm indeed very happy to be here, and I hope this type of conference will continue, and this will not be a one-for-all thing, which will die a natural death. It is important that we have continuity. We may not be able to organize it every year, but at least every 2 years, we should make an effort to organize this important and historic event. Having said that, I will now call upon Mr. Martin George to make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. All protocols being observed, good afternoon. I just had to mention to Mr. David West, the PCA Director, that I've been thrust into the breach here this afternoon, as it's only very recently I recognized or was informed that I have to be speaking this afternoon on this topic. So I will keep it very topical, very Caribbean, and I hope at the end, the highest compliment you can pay me is if you say you don't believe that I was just notified about coming up here to speak. So let's look at the challenges faced by oversight and civilian oversight institutions in the Caribbean. Here in the Caribbean, we live in an interdependent, interconnected, and interlocked world, which is intertwined, where we are tethered to one another electronically by our internet, our intranet, our laptops, our mobile devices. We use WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email, text message, and voice messages. All of these are ways that we are connected, but this is external. Apart from these electronic ties which bind us, we recognize, as Lord Nelson has poignantly and powerfully put it, all of we is one family. And this rings true all across the Caribbean diaspora. So many of us have relatives, friends, colleagues, associates scattered throughout the various Caribbean islands. The threads and strands which bind and unite us are all interwoven into the wonderful mosaic and colorful, vibrant tapestry which constitutes Caribbean life today. Economically and socially, we are all linked, connected, and integrated or interrelated in one way or another. Whether it is through West Indies cricket, CARICOM, Carnival, reggae, soca, Sumfest. Apart from our broad interconnectivity, we are even more linked and intertwined, and this is magnified, multiplied, and intensified within the borders and confines of each of our own small island spaces which we inhabit here in the Caribbean. In small island nations such as ours, we are all children of a lesser God, clinging slavishly to our own set of beliefs, ideas, and ideologies, with each proclaiming himself to be the Cyclops, the king, the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. So whether it is the man crab on the banks of the river, observing the callaloo of our kaleidoscopic Caribbean life, or Minchel's display of Sagaboy and Tantan on the international stage, or Minchel himself holding up a mirror to our society, a mirror showing ourselves as the dying swan, a broken beauty, bruised and battered, pieces littered on the sands of time as we slowly seep away to nothingness, just as the receding tides in the land of the tin gods and tin men, looking for a Dorothy or the Wizard of Oz to come rescue us. But the Black Stallion has already told us that Dorothy will wait. He says, wait, Dorothy. And she has to wait because he has recognized the failings and frailties of the Caribbean man, even while envisaging an independent future for him. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, says Leroy Caliste. But yet the same Leroy Caliste tells us to keep the chalice burning because the vampire is passing. What is this vampire sucking the blood of credibility, transparency, and accountability out of our law enforcement systems so that they remain bent and broken on the sands of time? What is this that he speaks of that leaves them gnarled and twisted shadows of their former selves? Is it still the Jamaican scenario of, I am Constable Brown, they call me Boy Blue, I going to show what police can do? Have we evolved at all beyond this? Or are we still locked in a never-ending cycle which still sees our police officers, as recently as this weekend in Trinidad, allegedly, and I say allegedly, stabbing patrons in a line as they're waiting to buy their gyros in Woodbrook? Have we evolved or grown at all? Or is it still, as is said by the famed Nigerian author Chinua Achebe, things fall apart? So that no matter how much we put things in place and put systems and procedures for self-regulation and self-assessment in the Caribbean, it's still a case where our celebrated Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul can look back on us with disdain and derision and say, we have created nothing. But we have created. We have made progress. After hearing about the initial struggles in Jamaica leading up to the ruling by the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights and looking at the progress made in Trinidad and Tobago with our own police complaints authority, we know that we have created something. We know that there has been progress. We know that there have been changes in Jamaica. We know that there have been changes in Trinidad. So therefore, it is not something perfect. It is not something not yet whole. It needs fixing, tweaking, and patching. We've heard the cries for legislative intervention, and this is not unique to the Caribbean, as we heard from Jerry McNeely of his experiences in Canada. But our uniqueness in a Caribbean construct may lie in politicians. Just to be clear, I said that as two separate words, lie in politicians. Very often, our leaders sacrifice the greater good of the entire country on the altars of expediency and for the fleeting, illusory attraction of what is sexy or politically attractive for the moment, mainly with a view to garnering more votes on election day. There's very little political currency throughout the Caribbean in making major legislative changes to enhance civilian oversight of law enforcement. Powerful police unions or representative organizations would put stumbling blocks in your way, and always with the subtle threat of withholding their votes at election time. They are usually a demographic which cannot be ignored in a small island state. They have friends, relatives, and associates who may all be sympathetic to their position of less enforceable legislation. And this, coupled with what may sometimes be a generalized public malaise for such esoteric and sophisticated issues in favor of more direct bread and butter concerns, the question of a public buy-in at the level of overt support is always a challenge for oversight of law enforcement. There's also the might and weight and power wielded by the governments in small island states to the extent where members of the public may still see law enforcement as an extension of the government, as the Bajan Calypsonian Gabi sang, left, right, government boots, government boots. Some members of the public may feel intimidated to go against the police, as they feel ultimately it is going up against the government. Mr. Miraj has no fear whatsoever in that regard. He's been doing this for years. And, this has actually brought about several legislative changes in Trinidad and Tobago and changes in the way we approach things, because there's never been that fear to challenge authority. However, in a major commission of inquiry where I was working along with a very distinguished Barbadian QC, he indicated that it is a real problem in Barbados where many citizens express fear of going up against the government because they felt they could be victimized or they felt it was being disloyal to the state. The forensic and CSI investigative capabilities in most Caribbean islands is often way below par. And we note the sentiments expressed earlier by Dr. Carolyn Gomes about the poor standards of forensic pathological investigation in Jamaica. While some of the examples she gave may be extreme to other Caribbean jurisdictions, it certainly is a cry which resonates with all of us as to one degree or another where we are all way behind the curve when it comes to our rigorous and robust forensic investigative analysis. This is exacerbated more so when the suspect or accused person is a police officer, because the integrity of exhibits, specimens, samples, or analyses is now at greater risk. In most of our criminal cases currently, police officers are the ones who have to carry exhibits to the Forensic Science Center. Our Professional Standards Bureau in Trinidad and Tobago is staffed by police officers. They would have other serving officers who are from their batch or who their batch members would know. And the closeness and community spirit in which we live magnifies and intensifies these interwoven and interlocking threads, bonds, and ties which bind, and sometimes bind us into crippling inaction. Budgetary constraints may also play a part in funding and resourcing these independent law enforcement oversight bodies in the Caribbean. And even from the perspective of us at the Police Service Commission, we can identify with organizations which complain about being woefully underfunded and under-resourced,